Are you looking for resources to teach developing world issues within secondary citizenship? Well, on today's Resource Review ICT special, we're considering 3 websites. They explore water and sanitation in the developing world, look at global affairs and the work of the United Nations, and offer a library of refugee testimonies. Recommending today's resources, we have Dr. Jill Rutter. Jill is a senior lecturer in citizenship education at the London Metropolitan University. On the panel today is Alan Mills from the Specialist Schools and Academies Trust, and Will Ross. Will is Head of Citizenship at Haverstock School in London and has trialled the resources for us in his lessons. Now, over in the test lab, Matthew Tosh, our resident ICT investigator, will be putting the resources through their paces. Well, Jill, your first choice of website for us today is called WaterAid UK. Tell us about this one and why you chose it.
WaterAid UK is the British branch of an international non-governmental organisation which works to improve water and sanitation services overseas. There is a Learn Zone which is great for consolidating teaching information in the classroom at the end of the lesson, and the whole website is written in accessible language.
Well, now let's go over to Matthew in the test lab for more of a tour of WaterAid UK.
The WaterAid UK site is part of the WaterAid International series of websites, and for anyone unfamiliar with their work, there is an About Us section on the homepage to give you more information. Now, at the top of each page there are 6 links to the different areas of the website, and I'm going to be looking at the Learn Zone today. Now, this brings up a page with some general teaching and learning resources, but I want to have a look at this one here about pupils 11 to 14. Now, it starts with a couple of games at the top, one of which I'm going to look at, and that's Pani the Hand Pump. And this looks at the issues surrounding providing water to developing world villages. And as you click through, you can see you've got a choice of either Ethiopia, Ghana or Nepal. So I'll have a look at Ethiopia. We get a quick introduction about some of the issues, and eventually you get to a multiple choice quiz. So how do you start to improve the water supply? Well, let's hold a meeting and see if that's correct. Yes, it is, so we're doing well. And you work through the quiz like that. Now, if you look at the picture as I go through the rest of the quiz, you'll actually see the well start to develop, and eventually we'll end up with a complete water supply for the village. Now, on the left-hand side of the page, there are links to the other areas in the Learn Zone. If I click on the Teacher section, it's divided into the different key stage areas. Now, one thing that caught my eye was the case studies, and if I show you the 11 to 14-year-old case studies, this features pictures and stories of real people in the developing world and the issues they're having to deal with when it comes to water and sanitation. And that brings me to the end of my quick tour of the WaterAid UK website. And now it's time to go back to our panel.
Well, Jill, perhaps understandably, WaterAid UK, the website, is very self-promotional, and it's also requesting donations. Is that really appropriate in an educational environment?
Well, fundraising is very much part of active citizenship, and all charity sites tend to be self-promoting, obviously. And I think the key difference between a good charity site that's asking for money and a poor one is that you've got associated educational material.
All right. Well, now let's go over to Will. You've used the website in one of your lessons. How did it go down?
With a Year 9 lesson, we actually tried the games. I found with all 3 of them, actually, they were quite difficult for students to access because it actually required students to click through, I think I actually counted 7 different screens before they actually were involved with the activity. And when they actually got to the activity, it was simply a multiple choice question, which really, for kids in this day and age, that isn't going to engage them when they see a computer.
Let's ask Jill, I mean, do you think it is a little bit limited?
Well, I wouldn't actually use it throughout a lesson. I would use it specifically at the end of a lesson for consolidating other learning that had taken place.
Alan, what did you make of this website?
I think the problem about the the recruitment drive in all charity websites is one that can only be addressed by the teacher being in control of what's being used. Talk to the children about the fact that this is a request for funding. Why are they doing that? Because it's such an important issue. I agree though with Will. There are certain things in this, it's the same old story. Everybody seems to think you stick something that looks vaguely like a game on and students will be interested. They're way beyond us on that, and these games tend to be, how can I say it kindly, rubbish. I mean, the ideas are good. It's a complete resource that needs to be used very carefully with a good teacher.
OK, well, thank you all very much. Now it's time to move on to Jill's second choice of resource. This comes from the UN, and it's the Cyber School Bus website. Tell us more about this one, Jill, and why you chose it.
Well, there's a great deal on this website, and it's easy to get to from the main UN website. The site is also updated regularly, but what I particularly liked is it has a comprehensive coverage of all 8 Millennium Development Goals.
Do you want to give us a little flick through?
Yes, I particularly like the video clips on the website.
And do you think students respond well to that kind of resource?
I think used properly within a lesson, students would respond well to this particular resource.
Well, for a bit more of a tour of the UN's Cyber School Bus, let's go back to Matthew in the test lab.
The United Nations Cyber School Bus website is literally full of information about the UN's activities throughout the world. And you can get an overview of this when you look at the web page. There's a list of all the educational resources on the left-hand side, and if I click on the resources heading, you go into a bit more detail. Now, straight away you can see we can have a look at the countries at a glance, and this brings up a world map, and if I click on a country, say Argentina, then this lists key information about Argentina. But even better, if I go back to the resources page, there's a funky little tool here called InfoNation. And this is where you can compare a variety of data for all UN member states. So let's have a look here at some socio-economic groupings. We'll have a look at the least developed countries. So I'm going to select Afghanistan, Angola and Bangladesh and click on Go. I've selected those because they were the first 3 at the top of my list. And now I have the choice of selecting different variables to plot by way of comparison. So if we have a look at infant mortality rate, there's my graph, and we have the option of plotting more than one graph on the screen. Well, if I go back to the resources menu, I want to show you this down here. It's the UN in our daily lives, and this lists some of the projects that the UN organisations do. So if we have a look at the agency listings, we can go down to the World Food Programme. There's a bit of an introduction, and further down the page there are some case studies featuring real people. So the United Nations Cyber School Bus website is literally full of information. There's plenty to keep your pupils engaged here, even if it is a little text heavy in places. Of course, I've only been able to scratch the surface of it here today. And on that note, we'll go back to our panel.
Well, Jill, as Matthew hinted, this is a very big website. How do you really think students and teachers are going to be able to filter through and get what they need?
I think this site requires teacher research and teacher preparation so that a teacher can guide a student through. But I think its breadth is its strength.
Right. OK, well, Will, what did you make of this site?
Well, as you said, it's quite a busy page, and I think students quite like that. But for teachers, when you're trying to prepare a lesson, when you see something like that, you don't know where to start. But if you actually get into it, you can see there's the curriculum page here, and in here there's actually lesson plans and actually some really interesting lessons. Like within the poverty folder, there's some role plays which actually spells out the whole lesson, which when you're a teacher, that's what you want. And another helpful point maybe for the WaterAid website was how to do a game well, which is another water one, but it's a lot simpler. Straight away kids know what they've got to do. So I think there is a lot of good stuff on that website, but it just needs to be slightly easier for the teachers to access.
Alan, what do you think of this one?
I think it's a tremendous site, absolutely brilliant site. I mean, I think the criticisms are right. It's quite hard to find your way around, but when you get there, the stuff on it is fantastic. And it's exactly what the UN should be doing. The Commonwealth should be doing the same thing. This is a resource set which the UN is providing in a way which schools are going to use really well, I believe. And this is an excellent resource. It's free, it's got it all there, the stuff on there, the video, the games, and the games are good. And I do think the whole thing is put together brilliantly.
Now let's move on to the third resource for today, another website called Refugee Stories. Tell us a bit about this website, Jill.
It's the stories of 60 or so refugees who've come to the UK. And it's real people's stories. Refugees face a lot of prejudice, and all research shows that if we're to challenge some of this prejudice, you've got to use real people's stories to get empathy. And I particularly liked this one story of a young Polish Roma girl who is a very keen footballer. And I think this story challenges prejudices about women, about Roma, about refugees. I think this is really great.
Now, one thing about the site is you do get the personal anecdotes and testimonies, but you don't get much background. The stories aren't really set within a context. Is that a failing of it, do you think?
I don't think so, because I think there's a lot of material from refugee NGOs and also in general citizenship texts which can address some of these background issues. But I think what is really unique is the testimonies, which you don't get so much are in textbooks.
All right. Well, quick comments from the panel. Will, did you like this site?
Yeah, I thought it had some fantastic resources, and I think it is something, like you say, it's great to use testimonies. And the school in which I work, there's a large number of refugees, but you can't really go in cold and say, tell us your story. But if you start the lesson by looking at other people's stories and the children can associate it with it, they're more willing to open up and actually reveal their own stories, which are often quite traumatic.
Alan, your thoughts?
I think I agree. I mean, it's a useful resource once you've started something on its own. It's a little bit bare. But I wonder what the reaction of the individual student would be to the site itself. It's certainly not something you'd send a child to look at on their own. It's something that has to be teacher-led. But I do agree the testimonials or testimonies are extremely moving.
Will, how did your pupils respond?
You have to make sure you use it in the right way. Like Alan said, you couldn't go in there and say, okay, there's a website, go and look at it. It has to be structured in the right way. And that was my main criticism would be that it would be nice, like they did on the UN website, was to have maybe some form of lesson plan there so a teacher can instantly access it and see how it could be used.
Well, thank you all very much. That's all we've got time for. But just to recap, the three resources that we looked at are WaterAid UK from WaterAid, the United Nations Cyber School Bus from the United Nations Teaching and Learning Project, and Refugee Stories from the Evelyn Oldfield Unit and refugee community organisations. For more information about the resources we've featured today, go to our website. It's teachers.tv/resource review, or if you want to, email us, resourcereview@teachers.tv. A very big thank you to our panel, to Jill, to Will and to Alan. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Resource Review. Bye-bye.